Hi, my name is Mike Stegman, Director of the Marshall County Conservation Board, and welcome to another episode of It's Our Nature on MIC TV. In previous episodes, we visited Greencastle Recreation Area where we had planned on doing some park renovation. If you've visited the Greencastle Park in the last year or so, you've seen that the lake level has been drawn down, and that was in an attempt to remove all of the rough fish that had been put in the lake. About 12 years ago, we discovered common carp had gotten into the lake somehow and populated it to the point where it really degraded the fisheries to the point where it was so unproductive. We just basically had to drain the lake and start over. In addition to draining the lake, removing the rough fish, we took the opportunity to apply for certain grants that would allow us to do some fish habitat and structural work below the water surface at normal pool level. Now, once the lake level's filled back up, you won't see any of this work. But if you want to see what it looks like now, I encourage you to go down, take a look at the summer of 2014 and see all of the silt removal that we've been able to accomplish through grants that we've secured through the Iowa DNR Fish Habitat program, as well as shoreline armoring, again, additional grant from the Iowa Fish Habitat program. The structural work that we're doing basically is on our own accord from the Marshall County Conservation Board in salvaging many pieces of leftover waste materials from construction projects that aren't hazardous when they're underwater, that will provide artificial structure, basically simulating a tree or any other big boulders, things like that. You can see some of the large concrete culverts that we put in there as simulating hollow logs for catfish structure. We're using PVC pipe standing up at various locations, old fence posts, things like that, to simulate, again, trees down there that the small panfish can hang around, get away from predatory fish, and hopefully get a little bit bigger and really improve the fisheries. We are in the process of GPS locating all of that structure so we can put it on a map, give it to people so they can go out and have better luck fishing. At the time we started to draw down the lake level at Greencastle, the board also moved to allow canoes and kayaks only in the lake. Now, that was a short-lived period of time since we drew the lake level down, but once the lake level's filled back up, we'll have access points for people to put their boats in. Again, paddle boats only for canoes and kayaks, no electric motors, but still you'll be able to take your depth finder out, your GPS handheld units, and locate those fish structures that we can hopefully make a better fishing experience for you at Greencastle. One of the other major projects we're looking at the overall park renovation at Greencastle is installing a modern campground, full amenities. Right now, to this point, what we have is a conceptual plan in-house, and we need to go on a fundraising campaign to begin the next phase of the campground. It's not even construction yet. We need to get some engineering completed, grade work, and then we'll be able to start with construction phases. The only location we had enough room for would be on the west side of the park on the large hill that right now is covered with native grasses. It's an area that, again, it's a restored prairie, not that high a quality. It doesn't have a lot of the flowers and forbs in it, so it was an area that we could sacrifice as far as habitat losses that have actually been compensated for in other areas that we manage. Over the last 10 years, we've been able to acquire nearly another 800 acres of wildlife habitat, so it's kind of a give and take program, if you will. But again, the campground will be located between the lake and the west boundary of the park. What we're looking at is having a 50 campground site for RV units. Some will be lakeshore sites, others will be full amenities, which means they'll have electric, water, and sewer hookups. This is going to be a long-lived project. So bear with us on time on that, but if you have interest also in helping us with the fundraising campaign for the campground at Greencastle, please give the Marshall County Conservation Board offices a call. Number there is 641-752-5490. And again, this is going to be a multi-year project that will allow for a full modern campground, dump station, new playground equipment. It's really a needed attraction in Marshall County and the Greencastle area with all of the amenities it has that lend themselves to each other. Well, again, they'll complement the campground and of course vice versa. little over a year ago, we went on a fundraising campaign again for park improvements that were would have cost above and beyond our general operating budget that are allowing for improvements to the bison exhibit at Greencastle. Because of the duration of time that's passed between when we first got our bison and today, it was time to make improvements on the enclosure that we house the bison in. Over the years, we started with just a bull and a cow, and of course they reproduced, and through the years we've had several calves produced. Some animals have been exchanged in and out with local bison ranches, but this is a great opportunity for people to come out and view a live historic aspect of the Iowa landscape. And so we went on a fundraising campaign for about $35,000 that would allow us to install a new fence around the pasture, as well as a new hay storage facility that would also act as a mechanical room for aerator systems for the trumpeter swan exhibit down at Greencastle. So overall improvements are being made at Greencastle, not just the lake, the campground, the swan exhibit, the bison exhibit, and even the astronomy club has visions of constructing a new observatory on site. So again, Greencastle being the cornerstone park that it is in Marshall County, if you take a tour down there recently, again, it's probably not going to look real pretty because of the construction that's going on, but the park is still open for use. The shelter houses are still available for picnicking. But once all said and done, the overall improvement of the park down there is going to be pretty outstanding. So again, take a visit down to Greencastle.
Nate Anderson, State Conservation Officer with the Iowa Department of Natural Resources. The fishing today at Sand Lake's been a little slow. Lots of people came out early. It's beautiful weather, a great day to go fishing. As far as people catching a lot of fish, hasn't really happened yet today, but as the fish become more acclimated to the pond, then things should pick up quite a bit. The state put in between 1,500 and 2,000 trout. A trout stamp is required to come fish for the trout in this pond, as well as a fishing license. Yeah, last time the success, the day they put the fish in, did seem to be higher. Lots of different factors go into that, as far as when the trout were fed at the hatchery, the weather conditions, etc. But like I said, as these fish are in the pond for a while, they'll get hungry, and the fishing should pick up.
What's he weigh? Did you weigh him?
No. I just know how big he is. He's like 11 inches.
So you got a secret for how you're catching them?
A spinner.
What color is your spinner?
Orange and black.
Orange and black spinner. I'll be darned. He's a nice one.
And how long did you fish before you got him?
5 minutes maybe.
We got him as soon as we got him.
Yeah. Clayton Warnell.
Okay. So you going after more of them?
Yeah. I got 2.
Was you here the last time they dumped trout in?
No, this is my first time actually catching trout.
Here we are, late spring, early summer, and one of the programs the Marshall County Conservation Board has been fortunate enough to work with the Iowa Department of Natural Resources on is a trout release at Sand Lake. This is a program that pays for itself, not only in that you need your regular fishing license, but you need to pay the trout fee that helps support the fish hatcheries, produce the young trout, grow them to catchable size, and then release them at various points across the state. For years we were after a cooperative project like this to happen here in the county, and lo and behold, about 2 years ago now was the first release we had. Occasionally what we'll do is have fishing derbies associated with these releases where some of the trout are actually marked or tagged, and we'll have prizes available for redemption. And what it does is inspires people to come out, never been interested in the sport up to this point in time. Well, they get involved, and of course fishing, kind of quite literally, you can get hooked on it. And so every spring and fall now at Sand Lake, and this is going to be a perpetual program, the Iowa DNR will come and release 2,000 trout at Sand Lake on the very back body of water. The limitations there are due to the size of the body of water in which the fish have to be released. These are catchable size fish. They're anywhere from 12 to 14 inches long. It's a put and take program, so if you go out there with the intentions of catching the fish, we encourage you to take them home and consume them. They're never going to reproduce in the body of water. We have had some carryover from one season to the next, so the trout are surviving, not only from the fall releases throughout the winter, but even in the spring of the year, people are catching them throughout the year. It's become a very popular destination point in Marshall County for fishermen. Public bodies of water in Marshall County come at a premium, and as I'd mentioned previously, Greencastle right now has no fish in it because of the removal of rough fish, and we had to take all the good fish out too, start over. But as I said, bodies of water in Marshall County public bodies of water are at a premium. Sand Lake, Greencastle, and then the Iowa River with the 4 public access points that we manage are really the only accessible water points here in the counties.
Okay, if anybody wants to look through here, it's focused on, so we're looking at the nest that's in the left of this tree right here. So you see on the left side up there, pretty well, and our avian ecologist, Bruce, has rheumatoid arthritis, so his hands shake quite a bit. So he's actually got binoculars that have a vibration reduction. I'm Stephanie Shepard. I'm a wildlife biologist with the Wildlife Diversity Program with the Department of Natural Resources, and we're here to train volunteers to monitor raptor and colonial waterbird nests, in particular bald eagle nests and great blue heron, rookeries, and those types of nesting sites. These are 2 groups of species that are very, that there's some concern about. They have conservation status. They're good indicator species of kind of what's going on in the environment because they're kind of top of the food chain, also associated with aquatic habitats. So, by watching them, we get an idea of what's going on, with their prey base and with things, the environments that they're using. And the Wildlife Diversity Program is very small, and we have responsibility for a lot of different species. And so, it was felt like volunteers and getting volunteers involved was a good way of getting some data on these really important and imperiled species. A volunteer monitor is required to, for example, for bald eagles, we assign them a nest site, one of the active nest sites in the state, and they go out and they visit the nest 3 times throughout the nesting season. So that runs from between February and August. And they make 3 official visits to the nest and tell us a little bit about whether the nest is occupied and whether it's being used, and also how many young are produced in that nest, and then how successful. Do those young end up fledging and leaving the nest successfully? And by gathering that information, we can then make we can imply some information about how successful these nests are, what the productivity in the state is, whether these species are doing okay. I think we had 9 folks sign up for the workshop here today, and they range in age from, very young to a little bit older, retired folks, and that's a good cross-section of our volunteers in general. A lot of them are retired, have a little extra time on their hands, and so can get out. It's not a very strenuous survey, so you don't necessarily, some of the nests you might need to do some hiking, but otherwise it's just being out and monitoring. But we also have younger folks as well, and folks all over the state. This workshop, it's a nice size. We generally don't want them to get bigger than 20 people, so having around 10 people is a great size and a good group to work with. A monitor needs to go out to a nest site probably several times throughout the nesting season, and they need to spend at least 30 minutes watching the nest site to see what kind of activity is going on at the nest. So it's a lot of being patient and having the time to go out there. And a lot of times we ask our volunteers to watch inactive nest sites, which can be quite boring because you can imagine just watching this empty nest. But a lot of birds will potentially not use a nest for a year or 2 and then come back in the 3rd year. So that information on inactivity is just as important as data on activity. So the volunteer has to go out and spend at least 30 minutes watching the nest at least 3 times, but usually more than that. So it's got to be someone who's pretty dedicated and likes being outside and is really passionate and wants to be more involved in the conservation process, not just donating money to something, or they actually want to get out there and get involved and collect data that will be used in the conservation of species. More and more of them nesting in unusual places. Sometimes their main food source may be, you know, if you've got a hog farmer that is spreading some of the carcasses on, you know, for compost or just throwing hog carcasses out. I think we have at least a couple pair that's their main, that's why they are where they are, you know. They'll find a burrow. They're not picky about what their nest is. There's one over in near Burlington that nests on a cliff,
Do they nest like in
like
pine
a ledge.
trees, or?
Yeah, they'll nest in any kind of tree. They don't really care.
Well, I know there's great horn. They visit my purple martin colony quite regularly.
Yeah. But this is an example of a situation you might have, like you may be this far from a nest, and you can see how having a scope would be almost necessary with this particular situation, and where you might have to come out here a few times and actually spend some time watching before you can get,
That's about the distance.
you know, spread hogs as you know, as compost out in the fields, or you know, or throwing hog carcasses out. I think we have a couple nests that are actually, that's 100% of what they're feeding on, because they're not necessarily near a water source.
Where's the Iowa?
See, now you're
You did
getting
good.
the search image going, so now the two of you are going to be driving places, and you're going to be like,
You're gonna noticing all of them. Good job.